Well, let's get some analysis now from our commentator. Angelo Fick joins me for this. Angelo, good to have you with us. I know you are watching this quite closely. I asked Tula Sizwe Similani this. I'll ask you the same. Any surprises? I imagine Gauteng.
Well, partly. I think the biggest surprise is the lack of women in these positions, that we have gone from 4 of 8 provinces with women headed by ANC officials to now only the one. And I think the African National Congress will downplay it, and we can then possibly see greater gender representation in the cabinet, or representation of women in the cabinet in terms of a gendered balance. But certainly the fact that so many of the women who were premiers were replaced by men, and those who did retain positions were demoted, and you can call it everything else, but it is a demotion back to speaker position, and that one of the more controversial women got to keep her job is, I think, cause for concern.
When it comes to one of the most populous provinces, I think one of the most hotly contested that we were all watching during the elections is Gauteng. We now have the name of the person who's going to be running the province for the next 5 years. Your take?
Well, look, David Makhura comes out of, among other things, the union movement. So, he was in Ahabu at one point. But we're also looking at a province that the African National Congress could only get just over half of the voters to vote for them. And so as Premier of the province, fast-tracking of service delivery will be one of his priorities in order to win back the disaffected voters, and also to demonstrate that the African National Congress cannot just run national government, but can run the government of the province in which the national economy is centred. And I think that's going to be a huge challenge for Makhura, and it's also not necessarily a very popular or very easy position to navigate through, because it will be judged very harshly, because it is the province in which the opposition, DA, made the most gains in terms of their growth, in terms of voters supporting them.
Now, when it comes to the big provinces, for example, like the Northwest, Limpopo and Mpumalanga, the problems we've seen there, Gauteng, you mentioned, very much the central financial hub. How do the premiers, for example, in the Northwest, Supremo Mapelo, handle those issues there, considering the problems we're seeing in the mining sector? Each province has its own problems, and we're told by the ANC these people have been chosen specially to handle those provinces. What do you make of, for example, the Northwest Premier?
Well, the Northwest Premier has a double challenge available to him that he has to tackle. One is the service delivery issue. This is the province that has seen water service delivery issue, protests in places like Madibeng, and it's also seen the labour crisis in the Platinum Belt. Now, those are two slightly different but related connections, because what you have here is largely the same groups of people being affected twice over. So one, you have employment issues that are now having real effects on nutritional levels for children in the province, in significant sectors of economy generating, cash generating economy. And on the other hand, you have service delivery to the poorest communities of basic services like water. This province has also seen several municipalities, major municipalities, in administrative issues, with interventions from national government and from provincial government having failed to redress some of those issues. So there is a sort of a bit of a mountain ahead of the Premier of that province that he has to fight. And Limpopo, I think, has a similar challenge, because in Limpopo, the African National Congress had a reduced majority, but also there was a reduction in the number of voters who turned out to vote. From 69 to 60%, that's a real reduction. And so what I think you're going to see here is an attempt by the provincial premier to build people's confidence again in the province's ability to deliver, given the history of textbook delivery issues, educational department failures, water provision failures, and service delivery at the energy level.
A final question for you, Angela. What did Nomvula Mokonyane do wrong?
Well, I'm not certain that there's anything she did wrong on her own. I think that what we pin on the woman who's often known as Mama Action is actually a failure across the structures in the province as a whole, and it simply got onto her. I don't think we should think of Nomvula Mokonyane as somebody who will fade, neither should we think of Thandi Modise as somebody who will fade, but possibly will be deployed more effectively in positions that don't attract that kind of complex shall we say, attention. So, Thandi Modise, again, not to take away from Ms. Mokonyane, but Thandi Modise is one of the most sort of significant figures in the NEC. There's a long personal history that people should not forget. She was in exile, she was an activist, she was in eNCA, she was one of the, she was tortured in prison. There's a long history of being a survivor, and it is that ability to survive that I think both Ms. Mokonyane and Ms. Modise will call in order to catapult themselves into significant positions inside the ANC that isn't a premiership.
Ironically enough, as you say, despite all of what you just said, only one woman as a premier around the country. Angelo, thank you very much indeed for coming in. eNCA commentator Angelo Fick. Expect a lot more analysis and reaction from him later in the evening, I'm sure. Coming up after.
You deserve to know more.
eNCA.com.